Hello, I'm Maria. This is Depression Hacks video 2. In my last first Depression Hacks video, I talked about getting up early in the morning, and I mentioned that one of the key ingredients to getting up early in the morning is having a good night's sleep. And this is something that not a lot of depressed people get. Insomnia is an incredibly common symptom of depression, and even if you don't have insomnia, chances are you have disturbed sleep from dreams or restlessness or what have you. So getting a good night's sleep can sometimes seem genuinely impossible, and sometimes it really is, and these will not always work. These ones I've come up, these hacks that sort of work for me, they may not work for you, and you know, sometimes I have to try all of these at once, and sometimes I just need one and it sort of fixes it, and sometimes none of them will work for me. So I'm going to go through them in sort of no particular order, because there's quite a few, but I'm going to start with the ones that are sort of more commonly known and sort of recommended by doctors and therapists and what have you, and then I'll go into ones that seem to work for me for currently unknown reasons. So the first one is don't eat within sort of the last 2 hours before you go to bed. And this is very well known. You know, your digestive system requires a lot of work and energy, and I don't know how many other people suffer from this, but when I went on antidepressants, I started to develop heartburn. I get really bad acid reflux, and the only things that help are omeprazole and not eating before I go to bed, and going into ketogenesis, which is difficult to maintain, and I don't recommend it for everybody. So yeah, if you can avoid eating just before you go to bed, it's a good idea, and you genuinely will sleep better for it, and you're less likely to end up with like packets of crisps and chocolate and what have you next to your face in the morning, which, believe me, I've done for like 60% of my life. Secondly, this is the first thing that doctors recommend, is don't have any sort of light-based stimulus. Don't have the TV on, don't be watching stuff on your laptop or your phone. Certainly avoid any kind of blue light. Usually some music or audiobooks are okay, but ideally no stimulus at all would be perfect, because that way your brain, like, you don't start to incorporate anything, you know, into your, like, the light doesn't disturb your eyes, and you don't incorporate any of the sounds into your dreaming, into your sleeping head, which I do a lot. You'd be surprised how often my dreams, at least the first dreams of my night, are based on something I was falling asleep to. And I'm really guilty of this. I do this all the time, especially since I started living alone. I try to listen to audiobooks wherever possible, or, you know, at the very least I'll put on something that I've seen 100 times. I'll turn the light away, like I'll turn the screen away from me, and I'll just listen to it instead. Because I do genuinely sleep better. And if most laptops will have a dimmer function where they cut out the blue light at a certain time of day that you can set. So from between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. I have red light on my laptop, and that, I can't tell if that helps or not, but it's worth doing. It's worth trying. Third one is really, it's one of those ones that you know you should do, but it's much harder, and that's fresh air and exercise. And if you're like me and you work in a windowless lab and you drive to work, and when you get home you're either dancing, or, you know, you're doing something specific, or you just end up like falling asleep in your living room. I don't see much sun being in Scotland, and I, you know, right now, it's ever since I got out of work today, it's been overcast, it's been rainy and cold, and all I wanted to do is like curl up in bed. And, you know, it's fairly common in Scotland pretty much every evening, so getting fresh air and exercise for me is not really a thing. even though I'd like it to be. I do find that when I do it, I sleep better. Like if I've spent a good hour outside walking around with constant exercise, I feel better. And it usually has to be like the combination of fresh air and exercise as well. Just exercise doesn't seem to help because that just makes me achy and horrible. So we're going to the ones that are a bit more specific to me and seem to work for me, even though I don't really know why. Well, I have theories as to why, but the first is to change places, change places, change where you sleep, and this can be anything from sleeping in a different room if you have multiple rooms, or if you share a bed with a partner, you can sleep on the other side of the bed from where you would usually sleep, or if you're like me, I find that sometimes just sleeping at the other end of the bed, with my head at the other end of the bed, makes a huge difference. And for the next week, I'll sleep much better, and then I'll have to switch back because I've gone back to sleeping badly. I have a second bed in my box room. I have a sofa which is comfortable enough to sleep on, and I have an airbed that I sometimes put up. And always switching always helps. Switching within my own home though helps. Sleeping somewhere unfamiliar doesn't necessarily help. I am not really sure why that works, but it does. So just a slightly different environment, give that a try. The next one that I do is I stretch. So stretching is obviously something we usually do just before or just after exercise to make sure that our muscles are sort of nice and relaxed. But it's a really good way of stimulating the blood flow. So if you're achy after a long day, stretching out, I like to stretch out my hamstrings, my thighs, my back and my neck specifically, but you can, whatever part of you starts to ache the most from what you do during the day, you can try stretching that out. And it's a good way of getting the blood flow back into those aching muscles, and anything you can do to increase blood flow. So I have heat packs that I put on my shoulders, that helps. I also have one of those percussor things, which is this, and they've sort of got a pseudo vibrator reputation, but they're actually really good, and this one's very powerful. This is a Homedics one. And they're really good for getting into sort of the knots in my neck and my back, and I find, and actually in my thighs as well. And I find that using that for 15 minutes before I go to bed will just sort of help me feel a bit more relaxed. The other thing I find is the position that I sleep in. So I'm a natural fetal position sleeper. I like to curl up on my side with my arm under my head and stuff, and that's not really the best for sort of breathing, for circulation, what have you. I usually find if I've had a series of bad night's sleep, especially with sore back and stuff, that I find sleeping flat on my back with one pillow underneath my head and then 3 or 4 pillows underneath my knees, so that my knees are elevated. I find that really sort of improves. I don't know what it does. I think it was something my dad taught me at some point. I just find that it's a more naturally relaxed position, and I get a deeper sleep out of it. And I wake up less achy in the morning, which is always good. And the last thing I can think of at the moment is just before, if I'm having trouble getting to sleep, or if I know that I have to get to sleep because I've got something to wake up for the next day, other than the usual work thing, I go through something routine in my head. And this is this is a variation on the old adage of counting sheep. So for me, I'm a ballroom dancer, so I have 10 different dance routines, and I like to go through each of them in my head as I fall asleep, and I never make it past 5. I'm always asleep. Usually after like 1 or 2, I'm fast asleep. Because it's just something that your brain's very familiar with, and it sort of helps you relax, and you can go monotonous and you just drift off. So anything, whether it's like reciting poetry or, I don't know, usually words are not great. I find that visuals are much better. So if you sort of maybe visualize your favorite, like your favorite video game or something, or if you like play through a film in your head, or you like walk down your favorite like country walk, something like that, that really helps me just drift off, and that is always 100% effective. Like I said, I've never gotten all the way through my dance routines before falling asleep, which is actually probably a bad thing, because then the Latin always gets left out, but never mind. Yeah, those are 7, I think, of my top tips for sleeping when you're depressed. And like I said, not all of them will work for you. Not all of them will work every time. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. Sometimes you'll need more than one, sometimes you don't need any. So, you can feel free to give them a try. If I think of any more in the future, I'll make sure to add them on. But yeah, I hope those work. If anybody needs them, then I hope those work for you the way they work for me. Okay, right. Talk to you in the next depression.